Hi, y'all. You know what time it is. Get into it. Get into it, y'all. Yes. Hi, y'all. Welcome to Storytime with Chris. Like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max relaxing, chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, work time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, and many, many more in between. Hi, y'all. Welcome back to Storytime. And I'm glad to be here. I almost contemplated not doing story time today. Like I said in my last video, I got a bit of bad news that I'm still processing. And I just really appreciate you all's patience with me in regards to my healing and my self-preservation. And I really do appreciate for those who have been reaching out to me and those who have been helpful. Thank you so very much. For me specifically, it's not often that you get to meet your heroes. And in a way, I inadvertently got to meet one of my heroes today. So I got a package today at work, and I'm going to try to make this story as concise as possible. So basically, me and my youngest brother have always been huge fans of Hank the Cowdog, head of ranch security. Hank the Cowdog is basically a collection of rambunctious adventure stories of Texas and cattling and the art of horse reining and cattle rustling and taking care of coyotes coming onto the property and buzzards trying to eat leftover food and so many different shenanigans that they get. It's a very comical series, but it's also quite adventurous and a bit suspenseful at times. So I would say about a month and a half ago, I got to meet John R. Erickson's nephew, who, for anonymity's sake, I'm not going to mention his name, but just know that I got it here on the package, and I'll show you in a second. I saw a picture of a cowboy on his lock screen when I was dropping off water for the table, because it was him, his wife, and his son, and they were visiting Yellow Springs. Apparently, his mother grew up in Yellow Springs and he was also raised here, but he hadn't been in Yellow Springs in 20-something years, and so they decided to visit. And so I asked him, I said, hey, like, are you familiar with Louis L'Amour? Louis L'Amour is one of my favorite Western writers. If anybody, any of the parents or adults who've read Louis L'Amour and knows the Sacketts and their stories, you had a great childhood. I was very fascinated. I was like, I'm a huge Western fan. He's like, that's funny. That's actually a picture of my father. He was a Texas Wrangler and was a handyman and, worked on the farm and worked on the ranch and was very awesome. That was my dad's life and his duty. And then we got to talking about Hank the Cowdog. And from there, we found out that I found out that his uncle is John R. Erickson, the author. And John R. Erickson is also in a men's choir. And him and his nephew and a couple other friends, they all sing together. And so I was super enthused about that. I shared my connections with Storytime in my email, and I just talked about all the different books that I loved by him and pulled out my quotes from my favorite ones, and they recorded 2 videos where I sang a song from one of the books and quoted one of the characters. It was magical. And they told me, they're like, we'll make sure you get an autographed copy from John. And, I've already cried, and I'm going to post that video later. Because I'm going to just say this, and I don't think there's anything wrong in saying this about me. Regardless of your religious affiliations, you're more than welcome to believe in what you want to believe. But for me, God is good. All the time. And all the time, God is good. I got a copy of Murder in the Middle Pasture, and it is signed and autographed by John R. Erickson. And we will more than likely read this for a special presentation of Storytime. And I also got a card from the family, and I will read it to you. Hi, Chris. Oh, excuse me. Hi, Chris. It was such a treat for us to meet such a huge Hank fan. We had so much fun with you. I showed the videos of you to John Erickson and his wife, Chris. They really enjoyed watching you. I think John was especially touched by your enthusiasm. Blessings, son of Loper, owner of Pete. Pete is a character in the story, Pete the Barn Cat, and his dad is one of the characters in the story, is very closely based off of his father. So I feel very blessed. I feel very honored and fortunate to be able to have such a piece of art in my home. And Mr. Erickson, if you ever get to watch this video, and I know I'm trying not to cry, if you ever get a chance to watch this video, thank you so much. I love your stories. I love how they were able to connect me and my youngest brother together. So funny, so fun, so many great songs. Thank you. Thank you so much. I feel very honored to have this. Thank you. Thank you so much. You never know when you're going to meet your heroes, and you never know who you're going to meet in life. That's why I try to make sure, even on my bad days, that I try to show love and kindness to everybody. Because you never know who you're going to meet, and you never know whose lives you're going to impact. So thank you, Mr. Erickson. Thank you so much for this. I will cherish this always. Thank you so much. I did pretty good. I was trying not to cry the entire time, but I'm a very emotive person, and there's no shame in my game when it comes to that. I see nothing wrong in expressing oneself emotionally. It's healthy, it's beautiful, and it's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, oh goodness, my glasses are filthy as usual. We're back with Lloyd Alexander's The Remarkable Journey of Prince Jen. We're going to continue with our new friend Mosha, the Honorable Robber, and Mafu, the right-hand servant of Prince Jen, and Voyaging Moon, the flute girl. So let's go ahead and get started. Chapter 11. Honorable Fat Choi. Mosha delves into a sack. The collar of punishment. You'll do the actual robbing, Mosha went on. As a precaution, you understand. Since it's not your profession, you aren't bound by the precepts. Whereas if I do it, there's always a chance the candidate may qualify for exemption and I'd have to let him go. Mosha, Jen said, I'm not robbing anybody. There's no way I can do that. A dozen ways, Mosha said. Don't worry, nothing to it. You'll see. As an amateur, you needn't concern yourself with refinements and niceties. I'll be there, of course, not in a professional capacity, only to give small pointers when required. Before Voyaging Moon and Mafu could offer their own opinions, Mosha seized Jen by the arm and eagerly hurried him into the underbrush. The robber flung himself onto the ground and peered through the tall grass. Mosha's ear of continual attentiveness had not deceived him. Within a few moments, Jen glimpsed a procession of some dozen attendants on foot, a supply cart, and a dozen packs of mules. At the head rolled a boxy two-wheeled cart, its curtains drawn. All we really want is food. Anything else will be a nice little extra, Mosha said. But this being your first time out, don't bother about money, trinkets, that sort of thing. People get too upset when it comes to losing their valuables. The main thing is to halt the carriage. I'll do the rest. Any pretext will serve. Tell them your grandmother has colic. Tell them whatever comes to mind. Or do you prefer armed assault? Lunatic! Mafu cried. You get us deeper in a mess. Go rob them yourself. Better yet, just go! We need food, no question about it, Voyaging Moon told Jen. But the simplest thing would be to ask. You say ask? Mosha exclaimed. The ear of continual attentiveness hears beg. What? The young Lord Prince turns beggar? Please maintain dignity, propriety, begging, indeed. Safer than robbing, Voyaging Moon replied. If it weren't for the precepts, I'd do the work myself, said Mosha, whose face had lit up and whose nose of thoughtful inhalations had begun trembling with excitement. What's to go wrong? Here you have the most elementary type of robbery. The great Quen Luan named it Bee Approaches Tiger Lily. Simple, straightforward, compared with breaking and entering. By this time the procession had drawn close enough for Jen to read the calligraphy on the fluttering red banners, proclaiming first to be the entourage of official of the first rank, Fat Choi. With a cry of relief, Jen sprang to his feet. Now, once you're there, Mosha went on, the first thing to do... Jen had already started through the bushes. He motioned for Voyaging Moon and Mafu to stand back. Keep Mosha out of sight, he called, hastening toward the road. This could be a palace official. I'll deal with him myself. Excuse me. He ran down the slope and broke through the undergrowth, hurrying to overtake the procession. Waving his arms, shouting at them to halt, he headed for Fat Choi's carriage. A pair of attendants blocked his path, angrily warning him away. Jen pressed on, calling out to Fat Choi, demanding assistance in the name of King Tia. With the attendants gabbling and clutching at him, Jen shouldered his way to the carriage. As the surprised driver reined up, the curtains shot open and an official of the first rank, Fat Choi, himself popped out his head.
Why stop?
Fat Choi's head, bald as a lemon, took up most of the window. His jowls overflowed his high-necked collar. His eyes bulged out at the sight of Jen, and he began puffing and wheezing with indignation.
What does this mean, disgusting individual? How dare you approach me?
Did you come from Chengya? Jen demanded. The Celestial Palace? You know me then. I require your help. I am the young Lord Prince. Fat Choi pressed his lips. As he looked Jen up and down, his indignation turned to amusement.
What good fortune is mine to meet such an exalted personage. No doubt you are in disguise for reasons best known to your royal self.
Thank heaven you recognize me. Jen heaved a sigh of relief. When did you leave Chengya? How is my father?
For one thing, Fat Choi replied, I am not attached to the Celestial Palace. Since you are gracious enough to inquire, allow me to inform you that I have been transferred from Fangxia to be Chief Magistrate of Chai Seng. For another, Fat Choi continued, you must admit that it is highly unusual to find the young prince suddenly appearing out of nowhere. Forgive me if I restrain my joy until I first beg to inquire how this has come about.
Fat Choi spread a fan and waved it lazily while Jin explained what had brought him to such a state.
Naturally, Fat Choi said when Jin finished his account. You can offer some small proof of these most remarkable statements?
I told you my warrant was stolen, Jin said with some impatience. What proof? I have my servant.
Enough!
Fat Choi gave Jin an oily smile and snapped the fan shut.
As a magistrate, it is my profession and my skill to distinguish between truth and falsehood. I have listened with undivided attention and the highest degree of interest in your testimony and have reached the only proper and correct conclusion. You shall be granted what you require, what you clearly deserve, and to which you are fully entitled. You asked if I recognized you, Fat Choi went on, beckoning to his attendants. Although I have not seen you before, I know you very well indeed. That is to say, I know you are a bare-faced, insolent liar. Fat Choi turned to one of the servants. Take this dog and beat him thoroughly.
Before Jen could make a move, one of the retainers seized him by the hair and flung him to his knees while the other belabored him with the bamboo rod. Shouting with pain and outrage, Jen fought to break free. Fat Choi's retainer doubled the blows. Struggling, gasping for breath, Jen ground his teeth in useless fury. Lay on, Fat Choi urged, watching with a critical eye. Diligence is a virtue. He thought to take advantage of my good nature. He should be grateful his punishment is not worse. All that kept Jen from howling like an animal was his refusal to give Fat Choi added satisfaction. As the blows continued to rain relentlessly, Jen bit his lips, spat out blood and curses, while Fat Choi smiled and nodded, ordering his retainer to apply the rod more vigorously.
Jen felt himself spinning into unconsciousness when explosions ripped the air. The horses reared in alarm. Fa Choi dropped his fan. His chin collapsed into his neck. As the explosions continued, a gaunt figure bounded onto the roadway, shrieking horribly, shirt flapping, his ropey hair whirling about his neck. Mosha leaped and spun like an acrobat, kicking out his legs, flinging himself against the terrified retainers. Fa Choi regained his wits long enough to consider his immediate well-being. He bellowed for his driver to speed for their lives, popped his head back into the carriage, and snapped the curtain shut. The horses plunged ahead. The retainers took to their heels, which is a very clever turn of phrase from back in the day. And the disarrayed procession went scrambling down the road in a cloud of red dust. Next thing Jen knew, Voyaging Moon's arms were around him, dizzy and breathless, his back feeling as if he had been rolled in hot coals. He tried to sit up while Mosha cavorted triumphantly, making impudent gestures at the departing carriage. "Magnificent!" The gleeful robber turned his attention to Jen. "Never anything so splendid!" "Are you out of your mind?" retorted Voyaging Moon, who began peeling off Jen's shirt to examine his injuries. "Look what you've done!" "Yes, marvelous, isn't it?" Mosha wobbled his head in admiration. "The young lord's brilliant inspiration. Who would have thought of getting yourself beaten to distract the candidate? A completely new technique. I must add it to my list. Call it Butterfly Dares Lightning." "What exploded?" asked Jen as Voyaging Moon dabbed at his back. "It kept Fa Choi from taking off the rest of my skin, whatever it was." "Firecrackers," Mosha said happily. "I was carrying them in my sack. Part of my stock in trade. They do produce a lively effect, don't they?" Mafu, clucking anxiously like a bad-legged hen, had meantime hustled to his master's side. He and Voyaging Moon helped Jen off the road while Mosha retrieved his sack and rummaged out a jar of ointment. "I keep it on hand for scrapes and bruises," the robber said. "I gather a number in my profession." "No doubt," Jen said glumly as Voyaging Moon gently rubbed the salve over his shoulders. "I've gathered a number too, with nothing else to show for it." I wouldn't say that," put in Mafu. "While our flute girl was setting off those firecrackers, and that madman was jumping up and down, I made off with the provisions." Mafu's lumpy face broke into a proud grin as he motioned toward a horse and a cart full of victuals. "Fa Choi won't eat much today, but we will." Instead of continuing immediately on their way, Voyaging Moon urged waiting until next day, and Jin was glad to agree. Despite Mosha's ointment, his back still throbbed, and he had turned a little feverish. He ate nothing of the meal Mafu prepared, but slept fitfully with Voyaging Moon at his side to calm him when he started up from a terrible dream. At nightfall, the girl took the flute from the bundle of gifts as she played. The voice of the flute seemed to ease his injuries better than Mosha's ointment. He no longer reproached himself for having lost 2 of the valuable objects, and his strength came back. He was eager to begin afresh. He felt confident of reaching the end of his journey, but his thoughts turned more to Voyaging Moon than to Tianghuo. Next day, when Mosha striding out ahead, Mafu and the cart bringing up the rear, Jin and Voyaging Moon walking along easily side by side, hand in hand. After a time, however, Voyaging Moon began glancing at the sun and frowning, with some perplexity. She called out to Mosha, who came loping back, cheerfully grinning. "Explain something to me," Voyaging Moon said. "Tianquo's north, isn't it? Why are you taking us west?" Mosha blinked at her as if astonished by such a question. "Because the road's better, of course." "Wait a minute," put in Jen, alarmed. "You're taking us the wrong direction just because of a good road?" "Naturally," Mosha said. "I'd be a fool to follow a bad one, wouldn't I? It's the nature of roads to turn, as this one's bound to do. I'm not in the least worried about it." Mafu by this time had come up to them. When he had heard the robber's explanation, he dropped the horse's halter and seized Mosha by the shirt front. "Come straight out with it, you idiot!" cried Mafu. "You don't have any idea where you're going." I do, Mosha protested. "We'll find our way, you'll see." The two would have kept on squabbling, but Jen ordered both to silence. Hobbling down the road came an old man barely able to support himself on the staff he carried. Jen stared, taken aback at the sight. For the man's head, covered with long white hair, matted and befouled, thrust out from a hole in a heavy square of wood wider than his frail shoulders. "Avoid him!" Mosha turned his eyes away. "Don't go near! He wears the kangu, the collar of punishment." Jen and Voyaging Moon, however, had already started down the road. "What punishment is this?" Jen murmured, appalled. "The kangu? I've never heard of it." "Not likely you would," Voyaging Moon said. "A prince isn't expected to concern himself with small legal details." As they drew nearer, Jen cried out in dismay. Despite the old man's blistered, sun-blackened face, Jen thought for an instant that he recognized him. Master Wu? No, it can't be. Excuse me. Master Fu? Jen stopped short and looked again. His eyes had deceived him. It was neither. For his part, the haggard-old man peered sharply at Jen. Why do you thus address me? I am Master Shu. And you? Are you the one I seek? Who's done this to you? Why? Jen bent closer. Never mind that now. We'll get that collar off to begin with. Beware. Master Shu raised a hand in warning. My kangu is bolted, sealed with a magistrate's seal. Excuse me. It means a death sentence for the one who tampers with it. You know the law. Excuse me. I don't know it, but it won't be a law any longer. Not if I have any say about it, Jen replied. Whatever you've done, you'll be free of this collar. By my royal command, I, Jim Xiaoye, the young Lord Prince. Are you indeed? So much the better. Master Wu narrowed his eyes. He studied Jen for a moment, then spat in his face. What ingratitude is this? By now our hero should have learned caution in identifying himself to strangers. But who is Master Shu? What crime deserves such horrible punishment? Who is Master Shu seeking? The answers to these and other questions are found in the next chapter.
And that is where we will end for today. Thank you all so very much for joining us. I love you all very, very much. And I will see you all next time. Bye-bye, y'all. Be good to each other. Bye-bye.